Hi everyone, I'm Lucas Hartman, a 57-year-old, and I'm at a crossroads with my 23-year-old daughter Sophie. About 7 years ago, when Sophie was just 16, my wife Celia, who is now 55, left us. She didn't say anything, just left out of the blue. I met Celia in college. I was 22 and she was 20. It was one of those typical love stories where we locked eyes at a party and just clicked. Her laugh could light up a room, and she had a way of making everyone feel important. We dated for 3 years, and I proposed to her on a snowy winter night in a park. She said yes with tears in her eyes, and we were so happy. I truly thought we'd be together forever. We got married in a small ceremony with just close family and friends. Celia looked stunning in her white dress, and I was the happiest man alive. For the first few years, everything was great. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing we couldn't handle. We bought a little house in a quiet neighbourhood and made it our cosy home. Then Sophie came along and everything changed. She was the most beautiful baby I had ever seen, with her mother's eyes and my smile. Being a father was the best thing that ever happened to me. I remember staying up late at night holding Sophie and dreaming about our future together. Celia was a wonderful mother at first. She doted on Sophie and seemed genuinely happy. But as the years went by, things started to change. Celia became distant. She wasn't the vibrant, happy woman I married. She seemed unhappy, but whenever I tried to talk to her about it, she'd brush me off or get defensive. I didn't know what was wrong, and she wouldn't tell me. We started arguing more and more. I'd come home from work and she'd be in a bad mood, snapping at me for no reason. I tried to be understanding and supportive, but nothing I did seemed to help. About a year before she left, she told me she needed some space. She said she felt trapped and needed time to figure things out. I was devastated, but agreed to give her some space. She moved into the guest room, and our communication became even more strained. We were like two strangers living under the same roof. Despite the tension, I tried to keep things normal for Sophie's sake. She was a teenager going through her own struggles, and I didn't want her to see the cracks in our marriage. Celia still cared for Sophie, but it was clear she was struggling with her own issues. I thought maybe she was going through a midlife crisis or something, but I never imagined she'd actually leave us. One day I came home from work and found a note on the kitchen table. It was from Celia, saying she needed to leave and find herself. She didn't give any specifics or say where she was going. She just said she couldn't do it anymore and hoped I'd understand. I was in shock. I couldn't believe she'd just walk out on us like that. It felt like my whole world had come crashing down. Sophie was heartbroken, constantly asking me why her mum left. I had no idea how to explain it to her. How do you tell a teenager something like that? I told her that her mum loved her very much, but needed to sort some things out. It was a tough time for both of us. Sophie and I grew closer as we tried to navigate our new reality without Celia. Later, I discovered Celia had left me for someone else. She sent me divorce papers a few months later. I signed them just to get it over with. Soon after, she married Elliot, a 59-year-old businessman. As a man, my self-esteem was shattered. There was no denying that Celia left me because Elliot was wealthier. It was a huge blow, finding out she moved on so quickly and to someone better off financially. It felt like a knife to the heart. I remember sitting on the couch, staring at those divorce papers, trying to process everything. I couldn't believe she had moved on so fast, especially to someone who had it all. Fancy cars, a big house, the works. I couldn't compete with that. I worked a regular job, just enough to pay the bills and provide for Sophie. Celia had always been supportive of my work, or so I thought. I never imagined she wanted more, or felt she was missing out on a luxurious life. It was devastating. I felt replaced, not just as a husband, but as a father too. Elliot could give her everything she ever wanted, and that stung. I spent a lot of time questioning myself and wondering what I did wrong. It was a dark period, and I often felt like I was drowning in self-pity. For a while I just went through the motions, took care of Sophie, went to work, tried to keep things together. Inside I was a mess. Sophie noticed, of course. She tried to be strong, but I knew she was hurting too. She missed her mum and struggled to understand why Celia left us for someone else. Eventually I realised I had to pull myself together for Sophie's sake, if not for my own. I couldn't keep dwelling on the past and letting it ruin my life. Years went by and Sophie adapted more to life without her mum. She stopped asking questions and accepted that Celia wasn't around. She focused on college and friends, which I think helped her cope. Then, one day out of the blue, Celia reached out to her. I remember the day Sophie told me her mum had called. She was excited but also nervous, unsure of what to expect, and, honestly, so was I. They started talking on the phone, and soon after they met for coffee. Sophie didn't share much about their conversation, but she seemed happy yet cautious. She didn't want to get hurt again. I tried to be supportive, telling her it was good to have her mum back in her life, but deep down I was scared. I didn't want Sophie to get her hopes up, only to be let down if Celia left again. Over time, their relationship seemed to grow. They met up occasionally, and Sophie began mentioning her mum more often. She talked about their chats and what they did together. It sounded like they were getting along, and that made me happy. Sophie deserved to have her mum in her life, and I hoped Celia would stay this time. Things took a turn a few months ago when Sophie told me she was getting married. She was thrilled, and seeing her so excited made me happy too. She mentioned that she would be inviting Celia and Elliot. While I wasn't thrilled about seeing them, I was genuinely happy for Sophie. It was her big day, and I wanted it to be perfect. Sophie planned the wedding with so much joy, discussing the dress, flowers, and venue. I was excited to see my little girl get married and start this new chapter. We had a few planning sessions where she shared her ideas, and I offered my help. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, and I was looking forward to being part of this special occasion. However, about 2 weeks ago, Sophie came to my house looking serious and nervous. I thought she might be asking for advice or sharing more wedding details, but it was something much more unexpected. She told me that Celia and Elliot were willing to pay for the entire wedding, but there was a condition. I couldn't attend. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. I sat there trying to process what I'd just heard. I told her it was ridiculous and that I was her father. I couldn't understand why Sophie would agree to this. I asked her who would walk her down the aisle if I wasn't there. She said Elliot had agreed to do that. Hearing that felt like a punch to the gut. I was hurt and confused. I could see in her eyes that she had already made her decision, and it broke my heart even more. I asked her how she could do this to me after everything we'd been through. How could she cut me out of such an important moment in her life? She seemed almost annoyed by my question, like she didn't understand why I was so upset. She said Elliot was better because he could afford to pay for the wedding. It was as if she didn't care about my feelings at all. I was heartbroken. I couldn't believe my daughter, whom I had raised and loved, could be so cruel. It felt like all those years of being there for her meant nothing now. I told her if that's what she wanted, then I was okay with it, but inside I was shattered. It felt worse than when Celia left me. At least then I had Sophie to hold on to. Now it felt like I had lost her too. I wasn't a poor man. I had a good job and a comfortable life, and I always managed to provide for Sophie. But I couldn't give her the kind of extravagant wedding Celia and Elliot could. They had money and connections that I didn't. Still, I had something special planned for her, a property my parents left me in a wealthy neighbourhood. It was a beautiful house, much nicer than mine, and I'd always thought of it as Sophie's inheritance. I planned to give it to her as a surprise on her wedding day, but since I wasn't invited, I started to question if there was any point in giving her this gift. Why give her something so valuable if she didn't even want me at her wedding? It hurt to think that she might not appreciate my gift, just like she didn't seem to care about my feelings when she chose Elliot over me. I have a niece, Nora, who's 19. She's a sweet kid, and I love her a lot. She's always been there for me, and we have a great relationship. She's studying hard, working part-time, and dreaming of her future. Nora has always made an effort to stay in touch, even when family situations were tough. I started thinking about giving the house to her instead. Nora's family wasn't well off, and she had struggled a lot. I knew that a house like that could change her life. She could live there or sell it to fund her education or start a business. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Here was someone who loved and appreciated me and could truly benefit from this gift. So I made the decision. I would give the house to Nora. It wasn't an easy choice, but it felt right. I still wanted to give the house to Sophie, but I felt like this was the right thing to do. I didn't want to give something so precious to someone who didn't value me or my presence in her life. When I told Nora about the house, her eyes lit up with joy. She couldn't believe it and hugged me, thanking me over and over. It felt good to see her so happy and to know I was making a real difference in her life. It was a bright spot in what had been a very difficult time for me. However, when Sophie heard about this, she wasn't pleased. She called me, likely trying to talk me out of giving the house to Nora. I saw her name on my phone and felt a sinking feeling, but I didn't answer. I wasn't ready for another confrontation or more hurtful words. The next day, Sophie came to my house. I saw her through the window, standing on the porch with a mix of determination and frustration. I knew it wasn't going to be a pleasant visit, but I opened the door anyway. She came in looking around as if seeing the place for the first time in a long while. It felt tense, and I could tell she was about to say something significant. Sophie sat down on the couch and started talking. She mentioned she had heard about the house and how I was planning to give it to Nora. Her voice was calm at first, but there was an undercurrent of something else. She said she was surprised and thought the house was meant for her. It felt like she was trying to guilt-trip me into feeling bad for giving something valuable to someone else. Sophie started to cry, or at least it seemed like crying at first. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked at me with a sad, almost pitiful expression. She said she couldn't believe I would do this to her, and that, after everything, she deserved the house. She talked about how much it would mean to her, and how it would help her start her new life with her husband. It felt like she was trying to manipulate me with her tears to get what she wanted. The more she spoke, the more it seemed off. Her tears felt forced, like she was putting on a show. She kept looking at me, waiting for me to crumble and give in. She asked, "Dad, how could you choose Nora over your own daughter? And don't you love me?" It was painful to hear, but I could see through it. It was clear she was trying to use my emotions against me. Sophie talked about how beautiful the wedding would be and how much it would mean to have a house like that. She said Elliot and Celia were only trying to help her have the best start possible, and that I was being selfish for not supporting her dreams. She made it sound like I was the bad guy, like I was causing all the problems. It was hard to listen to because deep down, I just wanted to make her happy. She kept crying, saying she couldn't understand why I would do this to her. She tried to make me feel guilty for not being at her wedding and not walking her down the aisle. She said she missed me and wanted things to be like they used to be, but it didn't feel genuine. It felt like she was saying whatever she thought would make me change my mind about the house. She even said I could come to the wedding if I wanted, but It felt like a last-ditch effort to win me over. She framed it like she was doing me a favour by letting me attend. I told her I didn't want to do this anymore. I was done being manipulated and treated like an option instead of a priority. It wasn't just about the wedding or the house. It was about how I had been pushed aside and how my feelings had been disregarded. Now some of my relatives are saying, I took things too far. What do you think? Update 1. Hello everyone. Thank you for your kind words. Your support really means a lot to me. I have some updates to share. Things have taken an unexpected turn since my last post. Sophie has been calling and texting me, trying to reach out. She even left voicemails, but I've ignored them. I wasn't ready to talk, especially after everything that had happened. I needed time to heal and sort out my own feelings. I hoped that with time we could have a real conversation, but I didn't want to rush into it. Things have changed drastically. Sophie isn't getting married anymore. It turns out she cheated on her fiancé and he left her. I was shocked when I heard. I never expected this. Apparently her fiancé came home early one day and found Sophie with another man in their apartment. I can't imagine how devastating that must have been for him. He confronted them and, from what I gathered, he saw them on the couch in a compromising position. He was so furious and heartbroken that he didn't give them a chance to explain. He kicked Sophie out on the spot. I found out through a mutual friend who still keeps in touch with Sophie's circle. She called me one evening to tell me the whole story, thinking I should know given everything with the wedding and the house. I was stunned. On one hand, I felt bad for Sophie because I knew this must be incredibly painful for her. On the other hand, I was angry and disappointed. She had made poor choices and hurt many people, including herself. Hearing about what happened brought up a lot of mixed emotions. Despite everything, Sophie is still my daughter, and I don't want to see her hurt. It also made me think about how things might have been different if she had made better choices and treated people with more respect. I ended up sending her a message saying I was sorry to hear about what happened and hoping she was okay. I didn't mention the house or the wedding, just focused on her well-being. It was a tough message to send, but I felt it was the right thing to do. Overall, it's been a challenging time, but I'm trying to stay positive. Sophie has been living with Celia and Elliot. It must be tough for them, especially with most of the wedding arrangements already in place. Part of me feels like Sophie got what she deserved. Cheating on her fiancé was a betrayal of trust, and now she's facing the consequences. It's a tough lesson, but sometimes we have to deal with the fallout of our actions to grow and change. Update 2. Hey everyone, it's been a while and there have been some major developments in my life recently. I wanted to share what's been going on. About a month ago, Sophie and Celia got into a huge fight. Sophie told me it was about many things that had been building up between them. Celia was upset about how Sophie had treated her fiancé and how it reflected on their family. Celia felt embarrassed and disappointed in Sophie's choices, and it all came to a head in a heated argument. Sophie called me in tears, asking if she could stay with me for a while. She said things had gotten really bad between her and Celia and she needed a place to stay until she could sort things out. Part of me wanted to help her. She sounded so desperate and lost, and it hurt to hear her like that. But I knew I couldn't just welcome her back into my life after everything that had happened. The pain and betrayal was still fresh, and I needed time to heal. I told Sophie I couldn't let her stay with me. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had, but I knew it was the right decision for my own well-being. Sophie was upset and pleaded with me to reconsider. She said she had nowhere else to go and needed my help. Hearing her so desperate tore me apart, but I had to stay strong. I explained that while I cared about her and wanted the best for her, I couldn't be the one to support her right now. I needed to focus on my own healing and move forward with my life. After that conversation, I felt a mix of emotions. I felt guilty for not being able to help Sophie when she needed it most. I worried about her safety and well-being, knowing she was in a tough spot. But I also felt a sense of relief and empowerment. I had stood my ground and prioritized my own needs, even though it was incredibly difficult. Since then, Sophie has been staying with a friend and reaching out to other family members and friends for a more permanent place. It's been a tough situation for everyone involved, and I hope she finds the support and stability she needs. As for me, I've been focusing on self-care and rebuilding my life. I'm spending time with friends, pursuing hobbies that bring me joy, and reflecting on what I want for my future. It's a process with good days and bad days, but I'm taking it one step at a time. I know some people might think I was too harsh for not letting Sophie stay with me. They might say family should always support each other, especially in times of need. While I understand that perspective, I also know that sometimes tough love is necessary. I need to set boundaries for my emotional well-being, and that meant saying no to Sophie's request. Update 3. Hey everyone, it hasn't been long since my last update, but there's been a new development. A few days ago, Sophie tried to get into my house. It was a shock because she still had the spare key I had given her before everything fell apart between us. When I arrived home from work, I walked into the living room and found her sitting on the couch. I was taken aback and didn't know what to say at first. I asked her what she was doing there, but she seemed determined and refused to leave. She said she didn't have anywhere else to go and needed a safe place to stay. It was clear she was in a tough spot, but I wasn't prepared for her to show up like this. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm, but I knew I had to set boundaries. I told her firmly that she wasn't invited and needed to leave. I reminded her that I had already said no to her staying with me before, and that hadn't changed. Sophie started to argue, saying she had nowhere else to go and needed my help. She pleaded with me to let her stay just for a little while, until she figured things out. It was hard to see her desperate and vulnerable, but I knew I couldn't let her manipulate me. As the conversation went on, she became more insistent and emotional, trying to guilt-trip me into letting her stay. It was painful to hear, but I had to stay strong. I told Sophie that if she didn't leave voluntarily, I would have to call the police. Once she realized I was serious, she packed her things and left. I could see the disappointment and hurt in her eyes, and it was a tough moment for both of us, but I knew I had to stick to my decision. About a minute after she left, the doorbell rang again. I was hesitant to answer, but saw through the peephole that it was Sophie. She asked if she could at least come in to get some stuff from her room. I didn't want to drag it out, so I reluctantly agreed. I waited downstairs while she went up to her room. It felt surreal knowing she was in my house, even for a few minutes. Part of me wanted to talk to her and understand her thoughts, but I knew it wasn't the right time. 5 minutes later, Sophie came back downstairs with a small bag of her belongings and left. I know some people might think I should have let Sophie stay, or that I was too harsh in how I handled the situation. Navigating family issues is tough, especially with high emotions, but I had to prioritize my own mental health and healing. Update 4. Hey everyone, I appreciate all the support and understanding you've shown me throughout this journey. I wanted to give you a final update on where things stand now. Recently, some of my relatives found this Reddit thread and showed it to Sophie. She was upset that I had shared our family issues online and confronted me about it, feeling like I had betrayed her trust. I tried to explain to Sophie that I shared my story to process my emotions and seek support from others who might have experienced similar situations. I told her I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for sharing my own feelings and perspective. On a positive note, Sophie has found a small studio apartment about 25 minutes away from my house. It's not far, but it's a step towards independence and stability for her. I'm glad she's starting to rebuild her life on a positive note. I took my niece Nora to my parents' house to show her the new place. She was thrilled and excited, which made me really happy. Nora is currently in college, and I promised her that if she finds a job nearby after graduation, she can move into the house right away. I haven't officially transferred the house to her yet because there are some logistics to figure out. I want to ensure everything is set up properly so she won't have to deal with taxes or other legalities. I also want to take a moment to thank each of you for your support through this challenging time. Your encouragement, advice, and understanding have meant the world to me. It's comforting to know I'm not alone in navigating these difficult emotions and decisions. So, thank you